Welcome to the Boise Startup Week Health Track panel. I am Jay Larsen, the CEO of the Idaho Technology Council. We're the voice from industry to build and grow innovation and technology in the state of Idaho and help innovation start, grow, and thrive. This health panel will talk about the human health industry and how we can grow a bio industry within our state. We have 4 fantastic panelists with us today. Sasso is the CEO of American Pharma. David Foster is the Vice President of Research and Operations and Innovation at HealthWise. Rex Force is with Idaho State University, where he's the Senior Vice Provost and Vice President of Health Sciences. And Paul Montgomery, who is with the Idaho Veterans Administration, where he is an oncologist as well as focuses on leading the R&D efforts at the VA. So Paul, why don't we have you start and tell us a little bit about what you do and how some of your thoughts about innovation within healthcare.
Thanks, Jay. Paul Montgomery, I'm a physician, a medical oncologist, and I've started at the VA several years ago seeing patients, but ended up over here full time because I saw this as sort of a keystone for potentially developing a biomedical center in Idaho. And it had to do with the fact that the state of Idaho participated with the state of Washington in the formation of the WWAMI program, Washington, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho, starting back in the 70s. And at that point, they put a fairly productive group of researchers here at the VA, and we had medical students and residents. I was actually a medical student here at the Boise VA back in 1983, 84, 85. And that experience told me that we're only going to grow by having that kind of a network of having clinicians who are asking questions and potentially developing new therapies have a center to flow from in Idaho. And University of Washington's vision was to create a decentralized medical school. Unfortunately, with funding back in the 90s, early 2000s, things shrank a lot, but that does not mean that it necessarily has to go away. And the model may change in the long run, but I see that this still becomes a center of where we can do things, primarily because as there's increasing pressures on healthcare systems to decrease costs within their operations, and most of them were kind of set up to be fairly luxurious in how they did things. They didn't really have room for research in the way that the VA mission really built it in, which actually started back shortly after World War II. They always had a research mission going back into the early 1900s, but after World War II, they really linked themselves up with medical schools across the country, and that continues to be the case. And that's really where this location and the footprint of the VA comes in my mind. Here at the VA, we have an infectious disease lab, and a case in point for how does that make a difference in when you have a clinical operation and then you have some research capabilities came through with COVID. With the onset of the epidemic, one of the researchers approached me on a weekend and said, hey, we need to start doing testing here at the VA because resources are going to be scarce. The testing equipment will not be readily available, and we need to set something up. And this is what we do for a living. So I told her to get me the sort of proposal, what sort of things we're going to need, what we have to buy. And she sent me the things. I looked at the numbers and kind of in my head calculated pretty quickly that this was going to be, about $500,000 in equipment, and then we were going to need people to run this. And I thought this is going to cost a lot of money. So overnight, this was a Saturday when she called me. Overnight, I was thinking, how am I going to sell this to the leadership? And fortunately, the next morning, the leadership actually asked me, what about setting up a COVID lab, testing lab at the VA? So both came together at the same time, asking the same question, and we got off the ground. We actually got FEMA money to get this running, and it's turned into an integral part of testing both here at the VA, testing at nursing homes. We actually did all the original prison testing. And some of the impact that's made has been that nursing home numbers have gone down because we were able to identify the infections and get people quarantined. And that actually has turned out to be true in the prison system too, where when we first started testing them, their numbers were they were almost 60% positive. And we've gotten those down to where I saw most recently, their numbers are about 10%, same as the general population, which is what you would expect them to be if they were being appropriately quarantined, if they were being appropriately managed. So we made it there, and it was because we had a research operation that could quickly shift and do something. Clinical labs are not set up to do that. I know in the community it's been more of a struggle. It's taken a long time. It's getting there now. I'm pretty excited to hear what Rex has to say about that. But that kind of quick shift is only going to come when somebody has an organization that is invested in doing R&D. And we can certainly talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that we'll talk more about that, but I think that is a wonderful point that I really like the thing because you actually went through the WAMI program, didn't you?
Right.
And so you've seen it, all the growth of all of this and the system that you were talking about and the connecting points that you're talking about. We'll put a pause on that because I will come back to that and some of this research, and we'll go to what you were just asking. Let's go to Rex Force from Idaho State. Rex, take it away. Give us an introduction and your thoughts.
Sure, thanks, and thanks for having me, Jay. I am Rex Force. I'm the Vice President for Health Sciences at Idaho State University. I'm an academic pharmacist, and before full-time administration, did a lot of clinical trials in primary care areas, in particular cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and conditions like that, both funded through federal sources as well as industry. I've worked over the last few years to work to try to grow our research capacity at Idaho State University. But I would say, Jay, that one of the biggest initiatives that we have, and really this is across higher education in Idaho, is that we are looking to align the training, the experience, and preparing students to better meet industry needs. That's been a big initiative of our president, but I think that's also come from the President's Leadership Council and higher ed in the state, as well as the State Board of Education, that we are putting together programs that not only are sort of the traditional didactic and experiential programs in health sciences, but that also are bringing forth skills that are informed by industry and by the needs of the greater community. Obviously, we don't have an academic medical center in Idaho, so we're highly reliant on the partnerships that we have, and we have partnerships with the Boise VA, for example, for training. We are looking at ways to be able to grow research collaborations with partners like the Boise VA or with St. Luke's or St. Al's or other health institutions. And I think that's going to be a very critical piece because we do lack that the horsepower of an academic medical center. And so I think what Paul brought up is important for us to think about as we try to fit this together. And that is that it's going to require collaborations across the state and these different institutions that I'm referring to, but also collaborations and support from outside of the state. And the WAMI network is a great example. We have other partnerships, at least amongst academic institutions in the West, that lead to increases in faculty infrastructure that's necessary for the right kind of research to be done. And we're looking at ways to grow many of the basic science as well as clinical and translational research opportunities that are occurring, at least at our institution, both on our Meridian, Boise area campus, as well as in Pocatello. So I'd be happy to talk more about some of those details, but I think those are some of the important points that I would raise, at least initially, is we need to be training people to do the right things in the workforce as it relates to biomedical industry, as well as we need to be leveraging all of the potential collaborations that we can to be able to do the R&D that's necessary.
No, that's great, Rex. And I really like this. We were talking about network. We're talking about bringing together what are the areas where we really need to look at training a high quality workforce in this space. And then the R&D is critical. So that's the same thing. I love the threads that both you and Paul are bringing up. So thank you for that. David Foster, HealthWise, take it away.
David Foster. I'm a Senior Director of Analytics and Insights at HealthWise. And we've been around as a nonprofit in Boise, Idaho for 45 years, since 1975, with a mission to help people make better health decisions. We do that by producing media that we license to health systems, hospital health systems, and payers, insurance companies, who then distribute that information to their patients and members to inform people about their care so that they can make informed decisions and improve their lifestyle and behaviors, get the right care, and do as much for themselves as possible. And as we've seen during this pandemic, it's very important for consumers to have good information. If there's misinformation or misguidance, then it becomes a huge public health problem. And so, our time really has arrived in many waves, not just this pandemic, but the shift to value-based care is another important thing that we're involved in. And we've been operating out of Idaho for this length of time. It is possible to innovate here in Idaho on health technology and engaging patients and work on a national scale, but also collaborate with our Idaho colleagues at the VA and ISU. I'm constantly impressed by what's happening at these institutions in our area, and what you all are doing with testing and potentially even genomics. I've heard tell that might be happening at the VA someday. All the computational pharmacology that's happening at ISU is just fascinating, and I want people to know about these things, and I really want to see Idaho become as successful as what we might see down in Salt Lake City. Yes, they have a massive academic medical institution down there with the University of Utah that has certainly fueled a lot of that. But I think it can inspire us, and we can do things here, especially as healthcare becomes more digital. And I would say, HealthWise definitely plays in that space. We got involved with information technology, back in the 90s when we started integrating with care management systems and electronic health records. And our founder, Don Kemper, who has been honored for his innovations by ITC, had the idea that information that you provide to patients is as therapeutic as medicines. And we see this trend continuing today with digital therapeutics, that going beyond the molecule, you can really help people monitor their condition, change their lifestyle, take their medicines if that's a part of their care plan, maybe report on some outcomes and adverse events, and really help with drug discovery to know what medicines are right to really help people with their conditions. So I'm enthusiastic about the future of Idaho biotech. I think we ought to be talking about it more. I'm glad that we are today.
That's great, Dave. I really appreciate your connecting points and from industry as a nonprofit, the amazing work that HealthWise has done, and the linking points back. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, Don Kemper, we inducted him in the Idaho Technology Council Hall of Fame. Fantastic individual who's done a wonderful, wonderful work for Idaho and Boise. So thanks so much. Let's go to Ray Sasso. Ray, take it away.
So when Jay asked me to participate in this, I was a little bewildered to start with, because I'm not an academic or a scientist. I'm an entrepreneur, actually, and a bit of a serial entrepreneur. The company that I run now, American Pharma Technologies, is Boise born and bred. I started it on 8th Street in 2011. And of course, had the usual challenges associated with startups in Boise, notably lack of talent. At that time, that's rapidly changing. It fortunately did not have very demanding financing needs, so I was able to accommodate that. But what I would like to contribute to this effort is an entrepreneurial spirit and perspective on the task in front of us. I think it's almost a given that we're not going to have the resources that we want in order to do this job. So we're going to have to resort to guerrilla tactics in a lot of cases, and creativity, imagination, and a few things that probably don't have a name, actually, in order to get to the objective that we want along the way. And I love doing that. It is my most energizing activity. As I shared with Jay, I promised my wife that my last project was my last project. And then the idea for American Pharma came along, and I just couldn't resist. I'd never done a medical startup before, and I always wanted to, because medicine is such an information intensive business, as Dave Foster mentioned, in so many ways, that it has been pathetically underattended to. The original vision for American Pharma was much bigger than we actually turned out to be. I was going to try to automate all aspects of drug trial data, and that turned out to be enormous. Far too big a task for me, way too much money, probably 15 to 20 million bucks. Plus, I didn't really know what I was doing. So we settled on a much smaller slice of that pie, which is to monitor drug storage conditions and make sure that they are always handled correctly. We've expanded a little bit beyond drugs to other kinds of materials like human tissue, eye banks, blood banks, and some other things. But that's essentially what we do. And I'm excited about the prospect of helping Idaho, Boise, Idaho especially, but Idaho in general, become more active in biomedical industry. It's a very powerful, active, and important industry that is currently missing from our portfolio.
Ray, that's fantastic. I loved a couple things I heard: guerrilla tactics, innovation, and our ability to be able to do things with underfunding things, which is what we've done. It's interesting. Our education system with K through 12 is one of the lowest funded per pupil, but yet the output is significantly higher than that. Maybe it's 12th to 10th in the country. So we at Idahoans know how to do more with less, but let's figure this thing out. I wanted to also let everybody know that Ray used to work at Simplot, where he and Scott Simplot worked very effectively to be able to bring the Micron opportunity to JR and made that investment. So Ray was very instrumental in that. So thanks, Ray, with all the work you did there. So here's, let's go on. I want to go back to Dave Foster. You know, you just talked about something that just kind of got me a little bit. I think we need to talk about how we can grow it, how we can model, what can we do to be able to grow this ecosystem. And you said, let's use some other areas. So you started talking about Salt Lake and, University of Utah. I used to live down there in the Park City area. And I remember I had the person who was over a lot of the research that University of Utah was doing. And it was amazing what they were doing at the time. Talk a little bit about what your thoughts are about what can we do to grow this bio space here, and then how can we use other areas like that we can emulate?
I think building on the work that we've done in the agricultural industry is maybe a way that we can have a leg up. So thank you, Ray, for all that you did there. Perhaps we can leverage our infrastructure and knowledge and workforce and any research that is going on at our Idaho universities around agriculture, that we could shift more towards biotech. And as I was saying, it's very encouraging to see what's happening in the Idaho universities around biomedicine, all the way to delivery of care and the health services research that is going on there. HealthWise has enjoyed some very nice collaborations with investigators at these institutions, and they've helped shape us. I mean, there are physicians at the VA who have reviewed our content and have suggested to us, these are the types of interventions that would be really helpful for providers to become more effective. And so I think doing a good job of working together is important. And then I think also enlisting our leaders within industry and within government to convene us, kind of like we are doing now, but then to attract innovators and funders who could potentially be based here. I mean, if you look at what has happened, with Micron, you gave as an example. I remember when Mr. Marotra was here not too long ago, getting a key to the city, CEO of Micron, he was saying, why hasn't there been another Micron? Where's the next one? So I think, the opportunity is now, especially as I think many are realizing that the lifestyle in Idaho is wonderful. We do have some issues where our population is smaller and maybe we don't have the funding, maybe we don't have the talent. But if we can attract people to move to the state, or at least to work remotely with firms in the state, then I think we can start to see some success.
That sounds great, Dave. Rex, let's jump over to you on this one. What do you think about this idea? I know that Idaho State's not the school where University of Idaho is, but what do you think about this idea of parlaying agriculture and working closer together with Idaho State?
Well, I think there are opportunities there. And I think that for us to be successful, we're going to need to partner across all three of the major four-year institutions. When we talk about the interconnections between agriculture and human health, the interface between the environment and human health, we have folks at many of our institutions looking at those connections. And I think that there's opportunity maybe on the agricultural side, looking at genetics and genomics and being able to move that into more human-related applications. But there are also, I think, some interesting things related to how do we sustain these kinds of agricultural industries over the long haul without having negative impacts on the overall ecosystem, on human quality of life, and creating the sustainability opportunities that will, I think, lead to a lot of different opportunities moving forward. I would also just like to go back to what David talked and touched a little bit on, and that is funding and talent. We do need to identify creative ways to resource this endeavor, right? And venture capital, I think, is one thing we can talk about. We can talk about public and private partnerships because those are going to need to be a big part of this. But we also have to think about strategically hiring at our universities to be able to supplement this effort. And when I say that, what are our hiring plans? How are we going to staff and fill positions at the university that are going to foster this type of economic development, and doing that in a very strategic way, not necessarily just to get somebody who needs to teach some courses, but how can they contribute to an overall coordinated research and development effort? And I think that is something that frequently gets lost without the right kind of coordination and leadership. that we get stuck in, at least on the academic side of things, we get stuck in just doing the teaching and the education and the clinical training that we need to do. And the research and development piece sometimes gets squeezed out a little bit.
Yeah, application's a big part of that, right? Rex, where you sit there and you have it. So we work back from what the applications come in, and then we can really do things a little bit more where we get that trained workforce more effectively.
Right,
like
no question. And we can do that with philanthropic efforts. We can do that with partnered investment. We can do that lots of different ways, but it needs to be strategically planned as we put this together with, and this is where the Idaho Technology Council can come in and help with that coordinated effort, communicate with the institutions, coordinate the economic development piece that's occurring, the businesses that we're trying to attract and grow within the state, to make sure that the academic side of the equation is really doing the right things and has the right leverage points to assist in all of that.
Rex, I like that. That's the Idaho BIO Alliance for Medicine is being developed for that very reason. So we'll have more from that. Ray, let's come to you just really quick on this point. We talked about, private-public partnerships. We talked about agriculture, and I know with your work with Simplot, what are your thoughts about agriculture being as an attraction area or part that we can really grow off of to be able to help human health and private-public partnerships?
Well, I think there is a tremendous overlap. There is a lot of activity right now at Simplot Company, at least, and probably other places too, on genetics, plant genetics, animal genetics, and the fundamental skills associated with genetic engineering. They're somewhat transferable to humans as well. And in any case, agriculture has always been an information source for human medicine as well. We test stuff on chickens and pigs and birds and all kinds of animals. And so it's an obvious asset for us to exploit. And Jay, as you and I have talked, I cannot help but look for competitive advantage in everything I do. And we need to ask ourselves, why here? Why Idaho? Why Boise? Why not Salt Lake City? Why not Seattle? Why not Denver? What can we offer talent, investment, and businesses that looks uniquely attractive in some way? And I think we have assets like that. I mean, they're not always the traditional ones. We have a spirit, an entrepreneurial spirit. We have a flexibility, capacity to move quickly. It starts small and an openness to, as I say, guerrilla tactics. That this is the perfect time. I think Jay is probably should be credited with his timing on this. With COVID, the major shift I've seen in medicine, especially in drug management, is what some people would call cutting corners and what other people would call increased efficiencies. But now is the time to do things. You can get stuff done awful quickly right now that would never have been possible a few years ago.
And a lot of that has to do with COVID and the quick nature of that a little bit more, right, Ray?
Almost all of it, yeah. That people have seen that, it's probably scary to try to develop and approve a vaccine in 6 months, but should it really take 5 years? So people are starting to challenge processes, procedures, regulations, and explore the real value associated with those practices. And what I saw when we started American Pharma is that, and you probably all see this, highly regulated industries are very slow to change, and for good reason. It doesn't make any difference if the idea is better. If you change, then you've got to go through the regulatory hurdles again. Who wants to do that, right? So change has been very difficult and slow in biomedicine and in medicine in general because of the regulatory oversight that in general has contributed a lot of value. But I think we've now seen where there might be very productive compromises to be made in some of the processes that are now available. We've seen in the drug management area in vaccine, we stay very closely in touch with that. It's unbelievable what I've seen. And this is a good time to try to do something new and different.
I like it. We can bring that maverick guerrilla activity that you're talking about. I love that. That's part of it. So, hey, Paul, let's talk about, this is great because Ray actually brought up something I think that really he talked about pharma and all these other type of things. You've got some great ideas with the research and all of the things that are taking place with infectious disease at the VA. What a great resource here. Talk a little bit more about your thoughts here.
As I listen to Ray and Rex and David talk about this, it's really exciting because what I see on the clinical side is we have a lot of needs, and we're not making that bridge to be able to get things going. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I don't have an entrepreneur sitting in my clinic who would say, is that really the best way to be doing things? There's got to probably be a better way to do it. And so having this conversation with somebody who's saying, let's get rid of the chaff, get to the things that we really need. And that gives us a competitive advantage over places that are big, not so easily moving medical schools. I was just on the line just before here talking with a friend of mine down at University of Utah, and she's saying everything works well, except it takes a year to get things through legal. I know that we can do things faster than that. We actually do them faster than the VA, but that's what happens in a large institution that's bricks and mortar in one place. If we network, just like we're networking here on this call, we can do things more quickly. We have a greater nimbleness to get hold of folks who actually have expertise. So when I think about Rex and how PhDs who are educating also are coming up with lots of great ideas. So the MDs, we're trying to take care of patients. Sometimes we are too busy to really see an idea and then move it forward. But if we spend literally like 20 minutes talking with a PhD, suddenly the light bulb comes on. And so I really love that part of things. And then with David's perception, it's like, I really want to get health-wise, like standing in our doorway at the VA saying to the vets, how can I educate you about what is your medical problems and how we should best address them? And how can we digitalize it for you? Those things, bringing those things together for patients brings value. It brings efficiency in terms of being able to address their problems. And the fun thing about the VA, our patients are incredibly complex. They have everything. When you study them, you can take care of other patients in the private sector much easier. So, you learn here how to take care of the hardest patients, and we can extrapolate that into the private sector with little trouble at all. So it's really exciting to listen to these different things. I just think about the network of MD, PhD, entrepreneur, and how powerful that could be.
Well, at the heart of everything, this is what's always been fun, is that at the heart of everything we talk about with the Idaho Technology Council is you need to have entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are developing new products and services and taking risks associated to be able to get those new products and services out to meet customers' needs. So maybe we can talk about how to do that, but I want to maybe open up a broad question, and anybody on the panel can answer this one. Research is one of the biggest and most fundamental pieces of this, as you tie it together with that entrepreneurial spirit you were just referencing, Paul, and it's been brought up earlier. How can we get research? How can we bring that together, and how can that be this kingpin for what we're trying to do in Idaho? And any thoughts?
I was talking with a researcher earlier about, what is it that we're lacking to be able to get a lot off the ground in terms of basic research, because so many ideas can come out of that when you then, as a physician, talk to somebody doing basic research, you realize you can apply what they're talking about. You can turn that into something that's a therapy. But it does take a springboard where you get enough money going in to get those labs bridged to where they're connected with private industry in some way. I'm fascinated to hear Ray's story about how Micron started. I grew up with various lore about that, and I imagine my perception of that is probably inaccurate, but it was something about Jack hearing about these guys coming up from Texas Instruments and going to start interested in starting a business, and he wasn't sure if it was worth investing. And then he heard that Hewlett Packard, who said it was not something he should invest in, but actually he found out that they were actually working on it. So then he invested the money, but and that it was like $20 million that got him started. But I'd love to hear what the actual true story is. But it's sort of one of those things where if you can incentivize people, that you give them enough resources to say, okay, let's see what happens with this thing since it seems applicable. And that's not going to happen until an entrepreneur weighs in and says, this is legit. This is something that can get off the ground.
That's a really interesting question about Micron, because I think it's very relevant to what we're trying to do. The truth is, it was harder, messier, rockier, and more disappointing from time to time than anybody talks about now.
It's guerrilla war. It's guerrilla warfare, Ray. That's what it is,
yeah,
right?
And on the wrong end of it a lot of times. I visited with Ward Parkinson about that fairly recently, just reminiscing. But we have to be prepared for the same thing. This isn't going to work out the way. There's a couple of foundational truths in entrepreneurship. One is that it never works out the way you think, and definitely never the way you plan. Right? You have to start off. You have to be prepared to take a step, look around very carefully, and learn what you need to learn from that step, and then plan the next step. You know, business plans, I've talked to lots of people about this. You're right, when you start a business, 30 pages of wishful thinking. I think, Jay, you probably know this number better than I do, but the average number of pivots for successful startups is what, 6 or 7, something like that? Yeah. So we got to be prepared for the same thing. This isn't going to be the way we think it's going to be. It's not going to work out the way we want it to right now. But we have to be open to reality, because in the end, reality gets the last vote. And what it will teach us is what we need to know if we're open to it. There's no doubt about that. If you keep an open mind, you will learn what you need to learn. And we should too. So how do we go about this? I don't know. I understand. Jay and I had lunch. We talked about how do you get all the parts and pieces working together? You need financing to get that. You need government tax incentives. You need talent, but they need to have a reason to be here. Universities are under tremendous pressure now, right? You guys, Paul, you guys all know that. So Rex, so how do we work that one? Well, those are problems. I don't know the answer to those problems yet. And none of us do, but we have to recognize they exist, and we'll solve them one at a time. So how do you get all of those? How do you work on A, B, C, D, and E when you just barely have enough time and money to work on one of them? I don't know. We'll have to figure that out, but we will figure it out. And I'm encouraged, you know, to answer the other question about someone raised, I think it was you, Paul, about, you know, how do we get the foundational talent for research? Well, you know, we have a lot of that with agriculture already. That goes back to Jay's earlier point about the connection and the advantage that we have from a very advanced and solid agricultural technology effort in Idaho. I visited with Scott Simplot very recently about a project he's doing now that bleeds very directly into human medicine. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of talent. We have a lot more going on in the Valley than we realize.
And part of that is to be able to bring it together, right? That's the whole network there, but I think everybody's been referencing is bring it together so people know about it, and we can find connecting points, and we can find out ways to accelerate and work closer together to be able to build a cohesive group that's building something that's going to be extraordinary. Because one thing's for certain, it's the old Einstein thing. If we continue to do what we've always done and expect different results, that's not going to happen. So we've got to find a new angle, new ways, new innovation to be able to change this. So Rex and Dave, any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I think one of the other things we could follow with the agricultural connection is the connection to food and nutrition. I mean, all the innovation that's happening in Idaho around dairy and other industries that are helping to feed people with a healthy source of protein and other nutrients that they need, that can go right along with things that help people choose healthier lifestyles. And also connected to agricultural is our rural aspect. I mean, if you go back to what Paul was saying about how, if you study how to help people in the VA, you can really transfer that to other, civilian type populations. I think with rural medicine, once you solve problems in rural medicine around telehealth and being able to connect to people and let them take care of themselves at home as much as possible with remote patient monitoring. If you solve those problems in Idaho, that's going to help people in Southern California. So, we don't need to be in Boston or San Diego with all of their gleaming buildings, with the latest genomics to succeed in this. We can do this in Idaho, based on our unique characteristics.
I think the only other point that I'd build on, and it's really what you were saying, Jay, is building a consortium that can advocate for telling the story of the things that we're talking about here, telling the ideas, understanding the infrastructure necessary to make it happen, not just financial, but intellectual capital and otherwise. And being able to advocate to the right individuals, whether it's in government, state government, venture capitalists, whatever the case may be, to then be able to move these initiatives forward. I mean, it does boil down to funding sources in many of these situations and making the right kinds of strategic investment, whether it's in education, whether it's in facilities, whether it's in whatever that infrastructure might be with a given project, to be able to advocate for that collectively, I think is something that we really could build upon. And then to David's point, I think that the telehealth angle is something we absolutely could do better than just about anybody else. I really do. The Boise VA is doing some incredible things with telehealth. At the universities, we're doing some things with telehealth that I think is quite innovative and important. And we talked earlier about, don't let a good crisis go to waste. COVID has absolutely opened the door to telehealth, and decreased regulation, decreased bureaucracy, and those sorts of things. Now is absolutely the time to be able to strike as it relates to telehealth opportunities, for sure. And we're the right place to do it. I totally agree with that point.
Yes, I would agree with you, Rex. I was the opportunity that yesterday I was on a call with Cradlepoint, and here you're sitting there saying, well, how's Cradlepoint coming in to all of this whole thing about biohealth and medicine? Well, they're doing a lot of things within the telehealth area right now, and they're creating a lot of connectivity. And so they have a major presence right now within their company that's going to be part of telemedicine. So we need to be able to bring those type of resources together to be able to answer these questions or just find out how we can do more. I wanted to also bring out one other point here. Cheryl Adams is a major driver because she's going to chair this whole Idaho BIO Alliance for Medicine. So I just want to put a plug in there for Cheryl. The other part that I wanted to kind of end, we're kind of bumping on our time now. So if I could maybe ask each of you to be able to take about a minute, talk about maybe something you think that might be a big shift that we could look at, or something that might be happening that's kind of top of mind for you to be able to say, how can we grow this bio ecosystem in Idaho? If we could do that, that'd be wonderful. Maybe we can start. Ray, do you want to take it?
Thanks, Jay. I don't know that I have any more to add to the comments I've made so far. I think what we are attempting to do is absolutely possible. And I also, as I said, believe that it'll be a process that we do not now visualize to actually make it happen. But having said all that, I think we've got a great shot at it. This is the right time to do it. As we've all observed, regulatory barriers are falling. Things are easier to do now. I mean, a year review of legal, I've been there, and one of, the famous stories, which are true, about Jack Simplot doing deals on a handshake were absolutely true. And they all worked, or almost all of them. If they didn't work, it wasn't because there was a lack of contract. So the idea that the formal procedures that have been an expense, and both time and money expense associated with activities like this in the past, this is the time to challenge those. And I don't want to do so irresponsibly, but there's a lot of the things we could do a lot faster and a lot better. I think we're the right people to do it. I think we're in the right state to do it. And I'm very encouraged by everybody's openness to that.
Thanks for that, Ray. That's great. I love that being nimble and quick to things and be able to have the right timing. I love those points. So, Rex.
I guess I would go back to some of the points that I've tried to make earlier, and that is aligning incentives, educating on the benefit of investment in R&D, and even I'm here to talk about it from an higher education perspective. Investment in higher ed and R&D in higher ed and medicine is going to pay dividends. And so I think that from an advocacy perspective, that's one of the things that we continue to need to drive home, that there is a significant ROI from that kind of investment down the road as it relates to growing this biomedical ecosystem that you're talking about, Jay.
Excellent points, Rex. Love the ROI idea too there. So let's go, David Foster.
One positive story about regulation has to do with the way that regulators have put pressure on the health information technology industry and providers and payer/insurance companies to release data that they've kept up in silos. So now all these organizations have to provide data about patients to the people. And it's going to create a renaissance of health information technology innovation. And we ought to take advantage of that here in Idaho. I want to see dozens of digital health entrepreneurs working with our universities, working with our existing institutions and creating new ones. And we are going to need to invest in higher ed. We're going to need more computer science majors, more people who are data scientists and biologists. So we need that training in order for those companies to take advantage of this great opportunity that's occurring with interoperability and access to patient data.
I love that. That's a great point. And I see that as a great opportunity for us on the analytics and on that piece of it. Thanks, Dave, for that. Paul Montgomery.
Return on investment. Ultimately, that's what we're all talking about. The folks down in Texas, you and I were talking about this yesterday, Jay. Return on investment is calculated in Texas as being about 5 to 1. For every $1 they invest, they get $5 back in a medical school. But I think we can show the proof of principle by doing exactly what Ray's talking about, is that we can do better than that. And we're, unfortunately, in this state, we really have to do better than that. We need to be able to take entrepreneurial ideas and move them along so they're not just sitting in a lab for long periods of time. We need to train folks to get there, as Ray and David have both articulated really well. And that's a major part of it. And we need that connection, that relevance. And that's kind of where I see the patient population and the physicians I'm surrounded with who are at the VA because they want to be involved in asking questions and coming up with answers. And that's all part of an entrepreneurial spirit. And it's been exciting to hear some of the things about food and nutrition, because one of the folks that just came over here actually gave a grand rounds this morning specifically looking at cholesterol. And she actually has a PhD in nutrition. She's an MD cardiologist. And those are the sort of things she's interested in. She came here because she wanted to be able to do research. She kind of wanted to come over here and stop getting the big paycheck in the private sector and get ideas going. So there's people who are willing to do things and people who are willing to take risks all over the state. And I think we keep talking, we'll find them and they'll find us and we'll get things moving.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul, for that. Thanks. This has been a great discussion, a great panel. I really appreciate the insights. And thanks for being part of Boise Startup Week. the health track, where we're trying to build more innovation to help build a human health industry in Idaho that will improve human health. We'll also grow and develop more research and development, and we'll build a bio network in Idaho. A special thanks to Ray Sasso, Rex Force, Dave Foster, and Paul Montgomery for helping us talk about this. And I think they're going to be a big part of growing a Idaho BIO Alliance medicine group in the state of Idaho. If you're interested in being part of Idaho BIO Alliance for Medicine, please send me a message at Jay Larsen at Idaho Tech Council. And you can also make sure I can get that to Cheryl Adams as well. So thank you all, and may we all have a health day today. Thanks so much.